How's this? Hear me? There it is. Cozy. Just today, a freshman student, an art student, told me that she knows now what she wants to do for her capstone. She's probably in the room. I bring that up because what we see in the room, what we see on the walls, on the pedestals, is the culmination of not just 1 year of contemplation, deliberation, struggle. It's, in some cases, much more than that. I would suggest that Bethany is a place like no other. This is a place where a person of faith, a Christian, can blend their talent with their faith, their artistic inclinations. That's something special. We're in the presence of something very special. Even though the sun right now is oppressive coming through those windows, we'll talk maybe about shades someday. I'm going to get out of the way, I promise, but I would have you make sure, even though you're here for the people, see the thing they've done. Really spend time looking at the work and consider what's invisible. When they make something, they're trying to lead you to realize something that you can't see. When you look at an artwork, try to understand what's invisible about it. What are they trying to help you understand? Now I get out of the way. Enjoy.
It's on? Okay. That sounds okay? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Before we get into my capstone, just a little bit about me. My name is Wosmek, and this year and this semester has been one of the most wonderful times of my life. Not only have I celebrated 1 year of marriage to my wonderful husband, Job, but we also welcomed our beautiful baby girl, Matilda. Her due date was April 17th, but she just had to be here for the capstone, so she came a little bit earlier, but we're so happy because we have absolutely adored every single minute with her. So for my capstone, I have an overarching theme or question, and that is, what does it mean to be a Christian woman? I chose this because for my liberal arts major, which I picked up my junior year, I had to have an overarching question to lead my studies. So I chose, what does it mean to be a Christian woman? And then I also implemented it into my studio art capstone. Something to keep in mind is that the subjects of my art are to highlight characteristics of womanhood. So first, I have a digital art poster, and this is of Florence Nightingale. I chose Florence because she is a particularly inspirational Christian woman, and she worked during the Crimean War, and the survival rates were very low, and because of her implementations of some more sanitary procedures, the survival rates went up by quite a lot. She also credits her faith with how she was able to work tirelessly day and night. So you can see these are some step photos, and I decided to add the lamp because she is often referred to as the lady with the lamp, and then the sun and the moon are to represent her working day and night. So next we have Mary. Most of us know the story of Mary, but I chose her because she chose to trust in God even when things didn't look like they would work out for her. And I definitely need to learn from that. So I chose to add lilies around the circle or the medallion to represent purity, and then in the corners, and what she is holding is gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I also decided to add the serpent because I like the idea of through a woman the devil was defeated, and that is based on this passage, Genesis 3:15. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. On to Esther. Esther was the queen of Persia, and when her people were threatened, she stepped up to save them. I really like how she used her assets, particularly her beauty, to get what she needed. In Esther 2:12, it says, "Before a young woman's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women, 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with perfume and cosmetics." Here are the steps for hers. What she's holding in her right hand is a bottle of perfume, and then in her left hand, she has the scepter or the rod that the king would have held. And then her dress, the purple, represents royalty. On to Jael. Jael's story is a little bit less known, and she's a biblical character. And her story goes, when Sisera, the enemy leader, was looking for a place to hide, she let him into the tent. And once he fell asleep, she went out and she grabbed a tent stake and drove it through his head, securing victory for her people. Really inspirational. I really like this because I liked how confidently and boldly she acted, and she secured victory for her people. So I really obviously wanted to add the large tent stake. These would have been pretty large because they would have been holding down massive tents in the desert. And then the desert lilies in the corners and then the bottom left piece are to represent how she is strong yet beautiful. On to St. Lucy. This one is a little bit more personal to me, and I'll get into it in a second, but her story is a little less known, and it goes, she lived in Italy, and she lived there in the time when the Christians were being persecuted, and she had someone who wanted to marry her, and she turned them down. He was a pagan man. She turned him down and kept her dowry, and ended up giving that dowry to the Christians being persecuted and hiding in the catacombs. Because of this, she was discovered. It was said that the pagan man who she turned down snitched on her, and she was martyred for that. So the reason that this one is important to me is because I grew up in very Swedish and Norwegian circles, and we celebrate St. Lucy Day on December 13th. So there's some tradition around this, and it might go a few different ways depending on how the family celebrates it. But the oldest girl would dress up as St. Lucy with pretty much the same outfit that you see her drawn in. And she would go around and serve hot cakes or sweet cakes or saffron rolls, and that's what's illustrated in the bottom corners by her name. And then maybe hot drinks to her family. Another thing that they were said to maybe have celebrated with was something called glögg, which is illustrated in the top corners, and that is a spiced wine mixture. So then on to my posters. So this is changing gears a little bit, and this is to focus on aspects of being a woman, and these are no longer historical figures. So this one is called First Fruits, and this one is to illustrate what women can bring to the church. So the reason I chose to do this one is because I saw a lot of women accidentally backing away from serving the church. And I get it, it can be intimidating. Sometimes we feel like the men are in charge of a lot of the things because they can vote and that they can be pastors. But I'm here to say that it's very, very important that we contribute as well. I would say that women are very good at fostering the church environment, and that's something that we really need to remember. So the bottom left window represents the time that you can give. So maybe you give time by teaching Sunday school. You could volunteer to help with a funeral or other things like that. And then the bottom right represents money. So I know a lot of women are absolutely killing it in the workforce, so we shouldn't overlook what we can do by just giving a regular offering. That is so important. So give your first fruits to the Lord, not just what is convenient. And the Proverbs 3:9 says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. So on to nurture. This one, I must admit, is a little bit of a personal piece, not only because I just had my daughter, Matilda, but also because my sister Cara has absolutely, this is based on my sister Cara, has absolutely been a wonderful role model to me. and I absolutely look up to her in motherhood. So she's absolutely killing it being a stay-at-home mom and playing organ and serving the church and raising beautiful kids. So I wanted to honor that with this. And something to say is having children is just so deeply unique to women. And I'm not saying that everyone has to have children, but every woman has to have children, but it would be embarrassing not to bring up just how wonderful and special this is and unique to women that this is. So a woman's ability to grow a child and then nurture that child is nothing short of a miracle. Psalms 127:3 says, "Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him." So, thank you all so much for being here. This is my husband waiting for me to finish up Capstone. So, thank you all so much. A message to leave you all with, especially the women in the audience. Don't forget your importance and impact of being a woman. It is so important, and you have special and unique gifts because you are a woman. So thank you to my professors, specifically Andy and Jason. I hope you guys are still here when Matilda's here, but that's wishful thinking. Thank you to the wonderful women that I've done Capstone with. And thank you to my husband, Job. Job, you have supported me through everything, and it takes a very strong man to support a very busy woman. You are going to raise such a beautiful daughter, and I cannot wait to see how God's will is done in our little family. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Faith Schoeneck, and for my capstone project, I decided to make one fairly large sculpture that encompassed the theme of God's providing hand at work in our lives. Before we get into it, just a little bit about me. I am a studio art major here at Bethany, specifically focusing in on the 3D aspect, hence the sculpture. I'm actually also an art education student here, and with that, working to get my ELS certification, which means that I'll be able to teach in our private schools. One of my favorite aspects with art is that you're able to just learn so much more about yourself and the different gifts that you have, whether or not you're an artist. And as a future teacher, I hope and can't wait to see that in my future students and just help them to really discover the gifts that God has given them. So now into the actual artwork. All the way back in August when I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do for my capstone, and also just having the future in mind, one passage that was consistently in my head from the Bible was Jeremiah 29, verse 11. I'll let you read that passage for yourselves, but one thing that I love about this passage is not only does it remind me that God is always there for me and always providing for me, always protecting me, but also that he has a plan for me, and he's always working everything according to that plan, according to his will. So sometimes you don't always see it, sometimes your life is not the greatest, but just having that comfort that God has a plan for you is just so amazing. When I was trying to think of an idea, I landed on that theme of God's hand at work, and the word hand just kept coming up. And another artwork that I always think about with this passage is actually Michelangelo's creation of man. In this artwork, you can see God reaching out to Adam. I not only see this as God reaching out to touch Adam, but God's hand is there to provide for Adam and to comfort him. So again, with the hand, I knew it was going to be incorporated in there somewhere, but I wasn't sure how exactly I wanted to incorporate this in. I had to think about, did I want one hand? Did I want two hands? If I had two hands or even one hand, how was I going to work with the whole gravity situation? I also had to keep in mind that this is an artwork that was meant to be displayed, so I didn't want it to look like there was just a severed hand sitting there. I had to think about that. I also had to think about the size because, again, I knew I wanted to do one fairly large sculpture, but just trying to figure out the size of that. So I ended up choosing to do just one hand that was going to represent God's hand, reaching out in a gesture that was not only a caring gesture, but also a providing gesture. So it could be God holding out his hand for you to come grab it, but also God's hand holding out to give you something. I also decided for the base to do a base of clouds. These clouds would represent heaven, so God's hand reaching out from heaven for us. For the actual size of the sculpture, I decided to do 4 times the size of a human hand, so your hand times 4, that's the size. And with that, I knew that I needed a scale model to work with, not only for the gesture to have to actually accurately represent it, but also to have those measurements to keep going off of. And with that, I decided to make a cast of my dad's hand. With that, I just got a regular hand casting kit, actually got it from Amazon, so very easy to use. It was an alginate-based kit, so the mold was alginate powder that you just mix with water, mix it up until it's all thoroughly mixed, and then I stuck my dad's hand in there in the position that I wanted it to be, left it in that position until the mold was fully set, and then carefully take the hand out. The alginate mold is able to be moved so that you can take the hand out, but it's still fairly stiff. So you have to be a little bit careful not to actually break that mold. Once the hand was out, you just pour plaster in there, wait for the plaster to fully harden. And the alginate mold is a one-use mold, so you just break the mold off of the hand and you're left with a pretty realistic cast of that hand. Once I had that scale model to work off of, I could actually start building that hand. And with that, I also had to think of the size limitation of the sculpture studio doorway because it couldn't live up there forever. So for the base part, for the main piece that would hold the hand, I just used a plywood square. I chose plywood because not only did I know it was going to be sturdy enough to actually hold the weight of the plaster, but also I used metal piping to make the skeleton of the arm, and in order to actually get that to hold again with the weight, I just screwed it into that plywood, so I needed it to hold those screws and the weight. For the actual hand part, the skeleton of the hand, I just used thick, sturdy aluminum wire and bent it into the shape of the hand. Because plaster gets heavy fairly easily, the more you build on top of it. I also chose to use styrofoam to build out big parts of the hand that I didn't want to waste a whole bunch of plaster weight on. So I used styrofoam for the part of the arm, and while building the skeleton, I also realized that I was going to need a support in the actual hand. And again, I used styrofoam for that. It was sturdy enough, but also lightweight. After I got the skeleton of the hand, I just started building it with plaster. Plaster doesn't stick super well to metal, so I actually took cheesecloth and dipped it in the wet plaster and then placed it where I needed it and wanted it. And then I just started building on top of that. You don't always think about it, but your hand actually has a lot of muscles and tendons and everything in it, like the palm of your hand. So with that, I didn't want to waste a whole bunch of plaster weight again on that. So instead of using styrofoam this time, I actually took newspaper, soaked it in water, which makes it actually very moldable and holds its shape. And then I shaped it to where I wanted it and needed it in the hand, and then just took that plaster dipped cheesecloth, placed it over it, and started building on top of it. Once I got the hand to a spot where I was ready to start working on the base a little bit more, I started making the clouds. Clouds, if you look at them, they're usually pretty fluffy. So I wanted to use gravity to my advantage in this situation. So I ended up rigging up a string web up in the sculpture studio. And again, I just took larger pieces of that cheesecloth, dipped it in the plaster, and just laid it on the web. And then I was able to get kind of those swoops and fluffy pieces of a cloud that you would see. Once that dries and hardens, you can just take it off of that web and it holds its shape. Again, with the base, I had that limitation of the Sculpture Studio door frame. So I knew I was going to have to build pieces that would fit together to make that base bigger. For these pieces, I ended up using styrofoam as the base on that because I knew it was going to be sturdy enough to actually hold the weight of the plaster and cheesecloth that I was going to be using, but it wouldn't be too heavy where it would add excess weight. With those pieces, I just fit them together in a puzzle piece situation, again, to build upon that base. And then I started just placing those cloud pieces where I wanted them and started plastering them together. One thing that's really nice about plaster is that it sticks to itself. One thing that's not so great about plaster is that it sticks to itself. So for these puzzle pieces, in order for them to stick together or fit together but not actually stick together, I ended up using a combination of plastic pieces like bags, but also saran wrap, and I just used that as a divider in between the pieces. It allowed me to actually make sure that the plaster was fitting together but not adhering to itself. Once I got the hand part of the base and the clouds all made, I started working on the passages that I wanted represented in this sculpture. Throughout the Bible, you can see God's hand at work in literally throughout the Bible, almost every single story, probably every single story if you actually think about it. So when I was trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to put on there, I made a list of some of my favorite Bible stories and just other Bible stories that you can see God's hand at work. Some that are extremely evident and some you have to dig a little bit deeper and kind of see behind the scenes. I ended up picking 8 passages, and then I took phrases from those passages to include in my sculpture. To create these letters, I just took a letter silicone mold, poured the plaster in there, waited for them to dry and harden, just popped them out, and again, plaster sticks to itself really easily. It's probably the best glue is plaster to plaster glue. So I just put plaster on the back of those and put them onto where I wanted them to be on the clouds. When plaster dries, it dries to a matte finish, and although plaster can be fairly sturdy, it can also chip very easily. With all of this in mind, I wanted to add a finish on top of it to not only protect the plaster, but also just kind of bring it all together. So I decided on a satin finish clear polyacrylic on top of everything. I encourage all of you guys to really spend some time with this sculpture afterwards or whenever you have time. And as you do so, ponder not only the different ways that God shows his hand at work in the Bible, but also in your life. Again, sometimes it's very evident and sometimes it surprises you in different ways. Just to wrap everything up, I really want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you for supporting not only me, but all the other lovely artists who are up here. I want to thank my friends and family just for their support and encouragement, but also just having confidence in me as an artist. I also want to thank my professors, Andy Oberon and Jason Jasperson, just for their guidance and, again, encouragement and support throughout the whole year. And then also I want to thank these lovely ladies up here for their encouragement and just being there throughout the year. I also want to thank everyone who actually helped me move that from the sculpture studio down here, because the part with the hand is actually pretty heavy and I can't hold that by myself. And I think that's all I have for you guys. I'll give it over to Maleah.
Is that working? All right. Hi, I'm Maleah Pfeifer. That is Pfeifer, not Pfeiffer. I don't have any relation there. My my capstone overall, my goal was to do glasswork, and over time while I did all of the glasswork, I noticed that every piece reflected a part of my life or things that I experienced, or just things I had been thinking about. So a little bit about me, I'm from Iowa. You can see the city I'm from. The skyline is kind of boring. That building looks like a pencil, that's it. I am yet another pastor's kid. So I'm not originally from Iowa, but from Wisconsin. My majors here at Bethany have been art education, studio art, and I have the ELS certification, so I will be teaching in a Christian school, one of our Christian schools, pretty soon at the end of next semester. Within studio art, I have focused a lot on sculpture, like the coin that you guys can see, and I have picked up the hobby of plein air painting, which is painting outside, usually painting landscapes. So, have you ever heard of warm glass? I'd like to see a show of hands for anyone who's even heard of this. Okay, somebody who isn't one of my professors, good job. Sorry. I'm gonna touch that better. All right, so warm, this is still working, okay.
It works.
So warm glass is a process where whenever you touch it and work with it as the artist, it's cold, so I don't burn myself. Doesn't mean it's not sharp, but moving on, it has a stage in between where it'll go into the kiln and then it'll be heated up, and that's where the warm part comes. So I'm going to focus on 2 processes that I did to create everything and 2 artworks that really show that process. First artwork is called When I Grow Up. The method for this one is called slumped glass. It is where, forgot to grab this, you take a mold like this, you put some glass on it, like that, and you chuck it in the kiln. Then you take it out and it works. So, the glass here, it definitely, totally, this is the first try, totally. No, actually, I tried it out with some plain, oh no. What did my computer do? Okay. I don't, but I hope that works. I've never seen that on my computer before, that's fun. So I tried this out with some broken glass from a frame to see what temperature would work. Yeah, that didn't quite work. I ended up trying 3 different temperatures and times to see what would work, and I found the best temperature for that glass. So I thought, yeah, I'll just try it out with a piece of similar glass to this. Yeah, that also didn't work. As you guys can see, this glass melts at a lower temperature. I wanted the top to be anything but flat and the bottom to not eat all of the kiln wash, which is basically cooking spray for the kiln. And it took it off of the mold. That's not what you want. So I ended up having to recalibrate the temperatures again before I could finally do the piece that you see here today. So now that I have the piece, I can talk about what it means, because all of my pieces have a meaning beyond just the basic thing. So the glass serves to help reinforce the sight lines in this piece, which is where most of the meaning comes from. So you have a bunch of birds, and they are a bunch of ages, and you can watch the sight lines, because the title is When I Grow Up, and then the missing part is, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. Those sight lines tell you who the you is. And you can look throughout the piece and connect which one's looking to what. This information is from, while I was growing up, it was also from the education courses I took here, learning about what ages look to who for guidance. You can see the high schooler here. Yeah, they're looking to their friends. Anyway, so speaking of education, since I learned about that in the education courses here, This is another work that I've spent a lot of time on. It's called A Christian Teacher's Call, and this is actually unfinished right now. What you're seeing on the screen is around step 2, step 2.5, because those are not the final materials. So these wings are supposed to be metal. These hands are supposed to be plaster. They still are in this, but it's not the right type of plaster. And then these are supposed to be glass. So, how do you get lambs of glass? Can I get a show of thumbs if you think slumping will work to make lambs of glass? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Let's see. Is there any thumbs up? Okay, everyone's correct. Good job. Yeah, slumping will not work to do this. I don't know how you would do it, and your mold would probably be stuck inside. So first, I'm going to talk about the process of lost wax casting. First, you have the sculpture. That's oil clay, so I can manipulate it as much as I wanted. And then you make a mold around it. That is an in-progress photo of a rubber mold. There is another one back where Molsted's standing. So you make the rubber mold around it, and then once that's done, you make as many wax copies as possible, because you only have, this is the limiting factor for how many chances you have for the glass to actually work. Hint, you'll need multiple copies. So after you have all the waxes and you clean them up, you stick them in a sandcastle. The actual word for this is investment molds. It basically is a sandcastle because it's made of sand and plaster. Those two combined, the plaster gives it cohesiveness, it holds it together, the sand gives it heat resistance. After you have investment molds, you have a barbecue. Actually, you burn them out. This video and all of the burning out was done by one Jason Jasperson, or not video, but picture. So he sat out there and with a torch and burned wax out of molds all day for 2 days. Very helpful. So after it's burnt out, you put it in the kiln and fill it with glass. I use tempered glass, not because it's safer when you smash it, but because the pellets are nicer to put in the molds. They're very useful. This is a photo of a casting that I started Tuesday. It came out today and I haven't demolded yet. This is from the casting I did over the weekend. That also took a long time. And this is what it looks like finished. All of the soot actually burns off. It gets so hot in the kiln. And then from this, you have to remove the investment molds, and you'll get something like this. It's still not correct. There's parts in the mold that crack and then glass gets in, and it's called flashing. You have to remove it. I prefer that over bubbles because bubbles just leave a void and you can't clean that up. But once you have your lambs, you can put them back in the piece. And I'm going to briefly talk about how the hands were made. These used a similar process to Faith's with her dad. I used Dr. Pfeiffer's hands, and she let me cast her hands once. And then I did some sculpting to get the drapery there. And then the wings, which will be metal eventually, use the same lost wax casting process, except instead of the kiln, is used the foundry, which means you have to pour the metal outside so we don't burn the building down. It's a little bit too cold to do that, so that's why it's not done. But now that we have how I made this established, we can talk about why do these things need to be glass, plaster, and metal. So the meaning of the lambs is related to what they're made of. They're glass. Glass is fragile, so are lambs. These lambs represent the students that a Christian teacher is called to care for and nurture and teach. The hands are the teacher. As Faith mentioned, plaster likes to chip. It's also sometimes brittle or it crumbles. It's very temperamental. It's not perfect. Neither are Christian teachers. We're human, hopefully. So these human hands are required to hold up the lambs of God, and that's a really high responsibility. But something is holding both of them up. That would be the wings. which are going to represent the Holy Spirit, because he is working through us teachers to care for his lambs. And he will make sure that his will is done even though we make mistakes. So I'm going to be getting a call next December. I don't know where I'm going. I can only pray that God puts me somewhere that he can really use me the best way that I can impact people. All right, before I say thanks, I need to mention these artworks since they represent why I'm giving thanks to some people. The elk here is called Hope, and the swans, this is a oil clay of the swan that you see over there in glass. These swans are related to parenthood. You can check out both of their descriptions and look closer at them to find out more about the meanings. So first, I need to thank my parents. They made me exist. Thank you. More importantly, they raised me a Lutheran so I could go to this school and I could make art about Christian things. And I don't know what I would be making if I wasn't going here. It wouldn't be nearly as good. I would like to thank my friends, both the Capstone ladies and everyone else around, for keeping hope and keeping me mostly sane. Thank you, Allie. I would also like to thank my professors, Jason Jasperson, who's done a lot of stuff to help me, Andy Overn for giving critique whenever he wanted. Dr. Pfeifer for letting me stick her hands in Alginate for like 30 minutes. And I also need to thank some students. A student named Soren, who helped a little bit with the investment and will be helping with casting. And Jaden Kirko, who helped me edit together my animations into the explanation video over there. If you have any questions for me specifically, you can ask me during the reception, but that is it.
Hey guys. Hi. Welcome to my capstone project titled Parable. I am Lydia. My name is Lydia Kratz. I'm an artist here at Bethany. I am mostly a painter and an illustrator, and my hometown is Birmingham, Alabama. Like I said before, I paint a lot, I draw a lot, but all in all, God has called me to make things, to create things. A little bit more of who I am. I have been making art my entire life. I have always wanted to connect my love for art with my love for animals, so I've been drawing animals since I was a little kid. Most notably, this is a page from one of my very first sketchbooks from first grade. And when I was in first grade, I decided that I need to track my progress to see how I will draw tigers for the rest of my life. And there's one from first grade all the way up until last year. Moving on to what I did. For the past year, I have been working on 4 large-scale paintings. They are each an allegory for a Bible story, which is why this project is called Parable. So when Christ was here on earth, he would often teach his disciples using parables, which are stories that always have a deeper meaning. They always mean something deeper, which is how Christ taught them. This is also how my paintings work. They all have a deeper biblical meaning. I also made this because I wanted to figure out how to combine my passion for my faith and my love for animals. And I would encourage you after this show to look very closely at these paintings and try to figure out the story that they're portraying even before you look at the title card. But the title card is a very good hint. Next, why did I make this? I said I wanted to connect my love of painting and my faith with my love for animals. And I made it in an attempt to show you how I feel when I see animals, and also I wanted you to be able to visualize the Bible in a new way. This can also help others make these sort of connections that I'm making between nature and the Bible. This is also, all of these paintings are also an attempt to communicate how I don't want to just paint what an animal looks like. I want to paint what an animal feels like, how it feels like to see these animals and to experience being in the same space as them. I like to compare it to, I want to listen to the music of the reindeer and the mountain lion and the peacock and paint that and paint what that sounds like. And this totally brings together my yearning to understand nature with my yearning to understand God's Word. Next, I want to dive into a little bit of the narrative. I'm not going to tell you everything about any of these pieces so that you can dive in a little bit more and see what's actually going on, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about this painting, which is called Highly Favored. Highly Favored is a parable for the Annunciation of Christ. So during the Annunciation, the angel Gabriel came down from heaven and appeared to Mary and told Mary that she was going to give birth to the Savior. I chose a peacock to represent the angel Gabriel, and I chose a bluebird to represent Mary. And those are both very specifically chosen for these characters. The bluebird is for Mary because she was traditionally represented wearing blue. And I chose the peacock for Gabriel for a few reasons. So back in the Renaissance times, angels were often portrayed with very colorful wings. And sometimes they were portrayed with feathers that were like peacock tail feathers. So I chose that for Gabriel, also because the tail pattern resembles eyes, which in the Bible, angels are also said to have a lot of eyes or look like they have a lot of eyes. Also, the bluebird is native to North America and the peacock is native to India, and that is key. So in all of these paintings, the North American animals represent what is on earth, what is earthly, and anything outside of that represents something outside of earth, so heavenly beings. And also, I wanted to point out that the tail feathers on this painting are made out of handprints, and that's also for a specific reason. So all of these handprints are sort of leading up into this composition and sort of all like leading up to Gabriel and to Mary, and that's meant to represent Christ's lineage. So these are like the handprints of the Israelites. All of this is leading up to this moment where God's promises are fulfilled. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the inspiration for these paintings. I was inspired by kind of every artist I've ever seen. Specifically, there are a lot of artists that use very confident brush strokes and lines, and I really wanted to be able to have that in my paintings, so there are a few artists represented up there that use that style. I want to point out a couple of my favorite wildlife painters, including Audubon and Portvilliot. I love their art, and that has heavily inspired my paintings. And for the past year, I've really been thinking about cave paintings a lot, and that has definitely influenced these paintings that I've made as well. So now we get into process a little bit. So last year in August, I started this entire project by making a list of Bible stories that I wanted to portray and a list of animals that I really wanted to paint. And the longer that I contemplated these two lists, the more that I found these parallels and these connections between these Bible stories and these occurrences in nature. And I was connecting those and figuring out how those Bible stories and these animals could work together. So once I sort of picked out which animals could go with which Bible story, I started the sketching process. So there's a ton of sketches for every one of these paintings, playing with composition, playing with point of view, playing with colors. And once I had narrowed that down, these are pretty close to the big paintings. I picked out the 4 compositions that I wanted to work with, and then I moved on to the canvas. So each of these are 9x12 drop cloths. They're just canvas drop cloths. I primed them just using 1 coat of house paint with a roller. There is a pulley system in the painting room that these were hung on, the same pulley systems that we're using here in the gallery space to present them. Once I was done priming them and the paint was dry, I would freehand sketch my composition onto the canvas using either chalk or charcoal. Once I was done with that, I went to Home Depot and I got 5 buckets of paint. I got red, yellow, blue, black, and white. So all of my colors for these paintings were mixed using those 5 colors. I started, as you can tell with this big roller. I found my new favorite paintbrush, which is this guy. This is a 4-inch roller that I found somewhere in the painting room, and then I took it for myself and I've used it on every single one of these paintings. I wanted to show you this paintbrush, which is a paintbrush that I used most of the time on a lot of my paintings. This is the average brush size for that. And I also wanted to show you, just for fun, the smallest brush that I used on my paintings, because the size difference is kind of crazy. Here's a little bit more process. So halfway through these paintings, halfway through every single one of these paintings, I started to get really, really afraid. The size, first of all, is just so daunting. It's kind of crazy, and being able to stand in front of it and say that I'm working on this is terrifying. It's mortifying, because you don't know how it's going to turn out in the end. You can hardly see it standing close to it. So I was afraid a lot. It was hard to see what I was painting, and a lot of artists can relate to that in the way that once you're making this piece of art, it's hard to see it from the outside perspective. It's hard to actually know what's going right and what's going wrong, and I was struggling with that a lot. But the biggest thing that helped me was to trust in God. And I know that God has a plan for this project and for me in my life, so I just handed over all control to God and said, God's will be done. Now there's just a few thanks that I want to say. First of all, I want to thank my parents and my siblings for growing me in nature and in faith. I would like to thank my professors, especially my dear friends, Jason Jasperson and Andy Oburn, for their fantastic teaching and their wonderful friendship. I would love to thank Nora for her support and her comfort through this whole project. I would like to thank my other Capstone girls for the wonderful community that we've created in the studios. I would also like to thank Joseph, my fiance, for all of his support and encouragement. You totally held me up during this. And finally, I would like to thank my friends, my girls, Lizzie, Maida, Abby, and Faith. I know you guys will eventually see this, wherever you are in the world. I look up to you guys constantly, and I couldn't have done this without you. I love you, and I can't wait to see you again. And thank you all for coming, and to God be the glory.
Wow. We've got some time for an engaging conversation. You have access now to these brilliant young women. I've got a microphone here that I'll do my best to move to you for the sake of the camera. We want to hear the question as well as the answer. And so if I don't get upstairs or I don't get there, please repeat the question so that the girls watching somewhere else in the world can hear what's being asked. So, hands up. Questions? Uh-oh.
Maleah, I am continually impressed by your ability to dive into really complex, difficult systems. Can you just walk us through how that works for you? You go into the unknown, whether it's learning a new program or a new way to melt glass. How do you do it?
The glass, we have a book in the sculpture room, which is really helpful. Has all of the instructions, and I can trial and error to get closer to what it wants me to do. I don't know how I managed to learn computer programs. It just, a lot of glaring at the computer and then looking it up and then glaring at both computers. It takes trial and error and a lot of dumb luck. Also, asking people who actually know what they're doing. Is that satisfactory?
Grandmas probably shouldn't ask questions. But my question is to each of you, beautiful, strong Christian women, and that is, when did you know this was what you were going to be called to do, to focus on art in your college education and in your life? Just a quick answer, on, it doesn't have to be long, but what moved you and when?
I guess we'll start.
Question.
Oh, I have to repeat the question?
Yeah.
When did we start wanting to do art? That's a bad repeat. Okay, that's good enough. Mine was midway through high school. I figured out I wanted to teach, and I had wanted to teach art specifically, and as I've been here, I've been expanding my own artistic ability and got really into glasswork.
Oh. I think more than anything, God has called me to be a human being that makes things. And he always has. I made things when I was a kid, and I make things now, and I will make things in the future. So I knew when I was a kid, and I know right now, and I will know in the future.
My mom tells me this story when I was younger during church that apparently I wrote my name in the bulletin when I was 2. And she always said that I had really good motor skills. With that, I've always just loved art and drawing and coloring. I remember in high school, senior year, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I also come from a family of teachers, both sets of my grandparents, parents, aunts and uncles, sister. So that's also always been on my mind. So I kind of just combined both of those.
For me, I couldn't settle on one thing in college, hence why I also picked up a liberal arts major along the way, which I won't be able to quite finish because I got a little sidetracked. But at least I'll finish with studio art. But art is such a good way to explore so many different topics. And not only was I physically making these things, but I was also exploring what I wanted to learn about through making them. So that's why I really love going the art route. That's what I have.
So a capstone in general, and especially these projects, all to someone who isn't studying art, even someone who is, it all seems very daunting, very ambitious. Was there a time, and this is for all of you by the way, is there a time where you guys felt like, maybe I can't get this done? Or I guess should that have arisen, what was your inspiration to just continue and persevere then?
Okay.
I don't know if I told anybody this actually, but I remember Christmas break coming and just really looking forward to it because I just needed a break. I was also working on one artwork the entire time, so I think that also is a little bit different than working on multiple pieces, because with that you kind of break up your work already. I forgot what the question was. What was daunting? Just keeping in mind that it is a big project and it's going to be daunting no matter what, but then also just taking that time and kind of just reassessing what exactly you are doing. And also just asking people for help and venting to people also helps. I don't know if that answered your question, but.
One thing that's really daunting is that you live in this bubble and you work on your piece so long, and then once you're getting to the end, you're kind of backing out and starting to think, okay, what are people going to think about this? And then you're starting to get nervous and you're getting scared, and then you have to remind yourself, the way that I got over that was that it really does matter and that your pieces are good, but it just took a little bit of support from the girls around and some help from professors to realize that it is good work and that it should be shown, but there can be really scary times.
I would say most daunting for me was about every third day after I started something new. The point I really wanted to give up was while I was making the rubber molds, because it's like pushing molasses over the sculpture and then watching it fall back down and repeat for 30 minutes, and that's one coat of many. The way I got through it was determination. I'm really stubborn. And also, I had a lot of different things to work on, so a couple of the pieces that I have in here just happened while I was doing rubber molds, because I needed something else to do.
Yeah. It's definitely daunting to work on pieces this big, so I was always kind of nervous about, like, are these going to turn out good? And I was always like, will I make enough paintings to like be cool? But my friend Lizzie always says, it will be good or it will be over. and I really took that to heart.
This is a question for Maleah. So I've noticed in a lot of your pieces, you're dealing with some profound thoughts that have some layers to them. And I'm wondering if there is a stage before creation. Like, do you journal, or how do you come up with this? How do you analyze it and decide to put it into artistic form?
That depends on the piece. I'm trying to look through my notes because this is my sketchbook. It really depends on the piece. Some of them began initially just as this would be cool. And then as I was making it, because it takes a while, the thoughts started growing. Some of them, like When I Grow Up, started initially as like, ooh, swimming swans, and then what if I had aegis? Wait a minute. Some of them have just got meaning later. It depends on the piece. A lot of it's just reflecting on how I'm doing at the time, what I remember, kind of memories from earlier, or just thinking about what it is to live, I guess.
Okay, cool, it is on. Hi, this is for Lydia. So I have seen a lot of your work throughout both of our times here at Bethany. I know a lot of the stuff I have seen is on the smaller scale, like your sketchbooks. I've seen a lot of your sketchbooks. But looking at what is in front of us right now and how large of a scale that is, what made you want to do such a large scale of work?
So glad you asked. So I had the awesome opportunity as a part of the art service to work on all of the art for the Wells Worship Conference last summer. So for that, we made 7 collective large pieces of art, and a lot of those were really large-scale banners, this size, sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller. And I did a whole ton of work on those. And being at the conference itself, as the work is being presented and as we're all worshiping together in the same space, it was really eye-opening. It's crazy to see God's word put together with artwork at this massive scale. I mean, we saw it, there was an art trip to Italy as well, and we saw that all over the place with these huge frescoes that we were seeing. And I think being able to see biblical art at this scale just totally does something for a viewer and also as a creator. And I really wanted that to be part of not only my experience creating it, but y'all's experience right now.
Little Alabama coming out.
Yeah.
Y'all.
Y'all.
Okay, I got 3 questions for each of you, starting, let me see here, with Grace. Don't answer the same set as 3 questions. See, being, pretty much art students here, pretty much, what's your favorite color, what's your favorite medium, and what's a question you have for the person to your left?
What was the last question?
What's one question you like to ask to the person on your left?
Question for the person on your left.
Oh, okay. I gotta think on that. Okay. So my favorite color is probably green. We have this green onesie that I just keep putting Matilda in. I wash it and it goes back on Matilda. My favorite medium is acrylic paint because it's fun and it dries fast. And my question for Faith, what has been your favorite part of this whole creation experience?
I'll answer your question first so I don't forget it.
Yeah.
Favorite part of the creation experience?
Just of the piece.
Of the piece. I actually had a lot of fun casting my dad's hand. It's right there. My dad's fairly tall. I thought the kitchen counter was gonna be the right height. It wasn't, so then there was like a whole position of him like trying to get in a good position, waiting for it to, the alginate mold to actually set. So that was exciting to see. Kind of felt bad, but it's okay. He's my dad. He loves me anyway. My favorite color, also green. What was the second one? Medium. I really like working with water-based clay. I would say that one. Question for Maleah. That's tough. Whose face did you use for the the broken mask? That's good. So Faith had previously molded and cast her face out of clay, and I was like, hey, I don't want to sculpt a face. Can I borrow that? I ended up having to use the mold to make my own face sculpt, so now she has 2 of them. One of them kind of looks a little bit more conical. So yeah, that is Faith's face. She also, with the glass test pieces, has amazing sunglasses. They're great. Favorite color is phthalo blue. It's kind of a blue-green. It's green again. And favorite medium to work, I'm going to say wire, because that wire is really fun to work with.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
Oh, right, I need to ask a question. How many caribou did you paint?
Oh, gosh. if you haven't seen that painting yet, it's over there. So, probably like a few million biblically. Okay. Painting-wise, they're just dots. You can count them if you want. My favorite color is red. And my favorite medium, I'm still kind of between oil paint and house paint. Because these were pretty fun. And I have a question for Grace. Did you have any specific artists in mind, stylistically?
Oh, wow. Yeah, my favorite artist is Alphonse Mucha, and his paintings are usually really, really busy. Mine are not so busy, but I love his figures, the way that he uses his shapes, and the way that he outlines things. I really like outlining things.
So Capstone is a project, obviously, but it's also a class. So I was wondering what's something you learned about yourself or your work, or even something like your faith in Capstone class?
I really learned what was important to me, and what my priorities were. This was a class that was really fun to go to, and I don't know, it helped me feel good about my education. And I don't know, I'm rambling, but it was just really wonderful, and I ended up learning a lot in it. I did not answer the question. I made something up. There you go.
I would say one of the biggest things I learned is just confidence in myself as an artist, and just kind of sticking to it. And I mean, we talk about this in probably every single other art class that I've taken, but the vision exceeds expectation, and just realizing that the ideas that you're going to have at the beginning, that's what you're shooting for, you won't always hit them, which is okay. You think about, you shoot really high, you're going to get pretty good. If you shoot for pretty good, you're going to get okay. So just setting those high expectations, and also just saying, hey, I did that.
I just forgot what I had. I learned that I am more capable to do things without help than I thought I was. And I also obviously learned a lot about the processes and refined those as well.
Thanks. I learned that I don't like painting any smaller than life size. I can paint life size or bigger. And I also learned the incredible importance of rest, and consequently the importance of hard work very quickly.
Last question.
Do it. Oh, no.
Oh, good.
So the one common thread through all your work is Christianity, and you are all terrific examples of that. You're unashamedly and unembarrassingly Christian. And if you were to ask the person on the street their opinions about the artistic community right now, Christianity would probably not be the first thing they thought of. So how do you get those two worlds to mix in a way that is satisfying to you?
It's not hard to make Christian artists, or Christian art as a Christian artist. It's kind of what happens. I am going into teaching, and that is kind of my goal, to teach the next generations of Christians so that they can at least appreciate art, and hopefully so that we have more Christian artists, so we don't see such a secular hold on art, and we can have things for us to say, hey, this is Christian art, this is what we believe in, and this is something we agree with. So I may not be able to do that on my own, but I can help teach next generations to be able to share that gift with the rest of the world.
No, you go first.
For me, it was impossible to separate my faith from my artwork. If I was going to be working on this for a year, it had to be something that mattered to me. Maybe that's also advice that I would give to anyone who has a show coming up, especially a capstone, is choose something that really matters to you, because you need to be invested in it. So I don't know, you were asking about the secular world and what they would think of this. I don't know, but all I know is that this is exactly what I wanted to make and how I wanted to make it. And it was impossible to separate my faith and my work.
I think with art a lot, it's talked about almost like journaling your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. Obviously that's different for different areas of art, but I think that's kind of an underlying theme. And having biblical art and being Christians, that is something that is on the forefront of your mind a lot, just your faith. So like what was already said, it almost feels kind of impossible not to include that, because that's something that's so important to you. And I would hope that a secular world would just recognize that and respect that, because they're going to do it in their painting too.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think in regards to the secular art community, Christian art is a really compelling way to evangelize, because artists like art. Artists are open to art, and especially art that is, there are some artists that are able to paint their faith a little bit more subtly. Like, you might not know that this is about the story that it's about. It's David and Goliath. You might not know that this is about a Bible story when you first see it. But like Faith, the one that says Proverbs 3:9, you're probably not going to be like, I wonder what that means. Yeah, sorry, Grace. And also, just as like a Christian, like personally as a Christian, we are called to be creators. God has created us, and because we are created by God, we are sub-creators now. God makes us, we make things. So like in that way, as the four of us being Christian creators, we are now vessels for God's word. We hold God's word and we share it with other people, and then they can become vessels for God's word.
One more time. Give him a big round of applause. Okay. They're going to be around. You can talk with them some more. We've got a little bit of housekeeping. We've got a chair rack over here. So, some of us are going this way. And we've got a couple chair racks in the choir room. This is going to be a bottleneck. Please be patient and watch out for the glass. And then treats are beyond. Remember, the real treats are on the wall and the pedestals. And talk to these artists in person. Get to know more from their very insightful minds. Thank you for coming.